Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a meeting of the Public Works Subcommittee of the Revere City Council. Would you all please rise and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to... And I would ask that if you have cell phones, you put them on vibrate, please, so you can hear everything that's going on. I'll even do mine. Okay, gentlemen, what we have today is a Public Works Subcommittee meeting to start developing a plan for after the terrible winter that we have, the epic historical snow amounts and everything that we went through. And I just want to acknowledge the folks that are in the audience, Mayor Dan Rizzo, Chief Gene Doherty, and Superintendent of Public Works Donnie Goodwin. So, and members of the committee, Steve Reardon, Arthur Quinasso, and we thank Councilor Bob Haas for attending. So what we're talking about today is the development of a snow removal and parking plan for the future. And we know with 8 feet of snow that we had, the traveling on our streets was deplorable to say the least. There were many, many streets that fire apparatus could not make it down, and ambulances and police cruisers had trouble getting up and down the streets. And some of the things that we've discussed so far is to turn some of our two-way streets into one-way streets. And one thing I'm going to ask councilors that are here, and we'll relay it to the other councilors, is to come up with some of your suggestions of streets that you would like to see one way. And I'm sure that the chief and the superintendent and the mayor have their own ideas of what has to happen, or what they would like to see happen. Some of the things that we've spoken about is one-sided parking throughout the whole city. I know, and expand our emergency artery streets. And, you know, one that just sticks in my mind is the Old North Shore Road section between the Revere Beach Parkway and Kimball Avenue. We did do it in an emergency this year, and it worked out. You know, some people weren't happy that we plowed their snow in, but we had to put it somewhere. And I just want to thank a lot of, many of the people in the city for their patience. I know there were a lot of phone calls, there were a lot of people upset, but a majority of the people in the city were patient. And if they had a real super problem, either the superintendent was called, the mayor was called, the chief was called, the police chief was called, or our ward councilors, or even the councilors at large were called, and we addressed it as soon as we could. So what I want to do, Mr. Mayor, you want to kick something off and bring your thoughts to this, and then you can talk to the superintendent and the chief after.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for calling this meeting. Clearly, this latest winter will act as a catalyst toward serious reforms that I think the city has to make. Should we ever encounter a winter such as the one we just went through. We had 9 feet of snow, and it wasn't just the fact that we had 9 feet of snow. We had 9 feet of snow in like 30 days. So it was an extreme challenge for our Public Works Department, independent contractors, to just keep up with a pathway for emergency vehicles to access. By and large, I think they did a tremendous job. I mean, we have reports still coming in of cars that were hit because they were under 6, 7 feet of snow that the plow drivers didn't know they were there. And so in an effort to try to clear streets, they were hitting cars, but they couldn't see them because, it was just virtually impossible. But, Mr. Chairman, you're 100% right that we all have to work together toward creating a plan that is going to make more sense. Revere wasn't built for the number of vehicles we have on our roads. And so parking is a huge issue. We've got Lynn, for example, when they call a snow emergency, all cars have to get off the road. They tow 500, 600, 700 cars during a major snow event like the one, or snow events like the one we had. I think we towed a total of maybe 15 or 20, you know? So not as though we're anxious to tow people, but when you think about what 1, 2, 3, 4 vehicles does to an entire street, so now everybody else suffers, everyone else that gets their cars off the road so plows can go by, it, you know, blocks the plow from going down from curb to curb, ideally, if we could. And I'm not suggesting that we're going to do what, you know, what they do in some other cities by saying nobody can park anywhere, but we need to come up with a better resolution. We need to take some of these streets that are currently two-way, that even under optimum circumstances, in nice weather, in many cases, shouldn't be two-way. So forget it when you have major snowstorms. So I think that, and so we are actively in discussions now. We've had a couple of meetings, I think, during the snow to start to talk about what we need to do and more or less laid a foundation down, similar to what we're doing here tonight or this afternoon, so that we can have these conversations, but not take these conversations and turn them into a real plan of action by the time next winter rolls along. And I would say this, and then I'll turn it over to Donnie Goodwin and Chief Doherty, who are both members of the Traffic Commission. But this is not going to be, and I know my predecessor used to say this is not going to be without pain. This is going to be a painful process for a lot of people that are going to have to understand that, yeah, we were always able to park anywhere we wanted during any type of snowstorm. We can't have that anymore because it puts too many, you know, people can't have their cake and eat it too. I want to leave my car in the street, but I don't want to see snow. Well, you know, I mean, we have to work together, and especially, like you alluded to, Mr. Chairman, the fact that most people were reasonable, and I thank those people. People really were reasonable. I mean, there was a lot of people out there, you know, thanking plow drivers, helping neighbors get shoveled out. We had a lot of that activity going on. And then on the flip side, you had the chronic complainers that were just, you know, calling and complaining, oh, it snowed again, so, you know, like Mayor Walsh says in Boston, you know, he got blamed by people for every snowflake that came down. So, you know, none of us wanted it. It happened. We dealt with it as best we could. And now we're going to try to create a plan that is going to put us in a position to at least take as good a care of our roads and our neighborhoods as we possibly can going forward. Because, again, these roads are very narrow in many cases and can accommodate maybe one-sided parking. Maybe there'll be streets we determine we can't have any parking during a snow emergency. So with that, obviously it's your meeting, so if you'd want to hear from either the Chief Doherty or Don Goodwin. Just one more thing before I close. Right now, now that the snow's gone, and God willing we don't get any more snow, but who knows with weather around New England. But assuming we don't get any more snow, we are dealing very actively with potholes. And the same way we ask people during the snow and the snow cleanup and the snow removal process, the same way we ask for patience during that, we have to ask for patience during the pothole repair process, because there are so many potholes because of the constant plows going over the streets and digging them up. And, you know, we've got hydrants and manhole covers and everything that's been knocked all over the place. And we are trying as best we can, not just with our own Public Works Department, but with independent contractors and extra money, thankfully, that the governor sent our way to help with these potholes. But they're not all going to get fixed tomorrow, and they're not all going to get fixed this week. We're going to get to them as fast as we possibly can, and I think the superintendent would tell you, I'm on the phone every single day with him, still in high anxiety mode like I have been since the first snowflake started coming down. So we are desperately trying to get these fixed, but it's not an easy fix. So I'm just asking for patience, okay? So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, can we hear from you for a few moments? I know you're a big advocate of some of these one-way streets, and I know you have some thoughts on it, but before I do this, I just want everybody to know that, you know, the plan of the thought process that I have is hopefully we can develop something like by July, because I know the Traffic Commission has to do, change the zoning for parking and traffic, you know, traffic rules. So hopefully we can get this done by September, and hopefully, again, I know we want to get signs up, and so I know the superintendent wants to be able to have plenty of time to be able to put these signs in process before the winter falls. So that's kind of the thought process I have. I don't know if it's a good time frame, you know, for you guys in the Traffic Commission or not, but.
The downside of it, obviously, is public hearings will be
Right.
necessary. And whether we do a public hearing by neighborhood or citywide, it could be
Yeah, right,
a
I understand.
free-for-all. Because like, as the mayor says, it's going to be painful.
Yep.
If we start
Understood.
changing directions of streets and ways and things like that. I mean, some of them, it's an absolute necessity. It
Right.
just doesn't make any sense
Right.
for it to be one way without snow. So, but we've had these meetings, as the mayor said, he called the first meeting we had was actually before the big storm. We had a meeting to discuss what we thought going forward we should be doing, and then we got hit with the blizzard. But we were ahead of it. We got the ordinances from surrounding areas, Chelsea, Somerville, Everett, Malden, I think. So we kind of culled the best of all of them without getting too dramatic. And we think we've had some good ideas and examples to go forward with as far as, you know, instituting the snow emergencies and how long, to what degree, to the whether we're going to go full-scale parking one side the whole city. I mean, but it's going to be painful, and there's going to be a lot of towing. Like, I mean, Lynn and Donnie can tell you when some of the cars we had towed, were cars from out of town. They weren't allowed to park in Winthrop, or they weren't allowed to park in Lynn, and they were parking in Revere. And the cars, they just left them there for weeks, and they were the ones who were buried, and you know, and the most vocal complainers. So, but we have an idea, and you know, through the mayor's office, pretty much, I think we'll probably want to present a plan, right, from the mayor and from the public safety and the DPW as to what we think, and then go before you and then the Traffic Commission. But money, signs, you're going to do a lot of signs, changes, things like that. You have to understand you're going to have to do that. In my budget, I've already asked for that money that you approved to do the hydrant markers. We have a good one that we believe with a little flag type thing on the top of them, and that alone, to do up to 1,000, we have over 900 hydrants, and we're going to order about 1,000. That alone is going to be close to $30,000. Yeah, so it's in my budget. And
Who would put them up?
well, that's going to be, you know, I'll have to apply it in a certain way to the firefighters. I'm hoping that, you know, it's not a change of working conditions or anything like that. We're not in charge of the hydrants, technically, the DPW are, but we go out, we shovel them, we check them, we do things like that. And it'll be a learning curve, technically, for a lot of firefighters if we do go out and we actually, all we have to do is take off one cap, it goes on the connection, it just slides right on, doesn't come off. And it'll be a learning curve for the firefighters to learn their hydrants better as well. Once you go and do something to a hydrant, you don't forget it. It's like shoveling them out. You don't forget it when you shoveled out 7 feet of snow.
Chief, if the cap comes off, does the rod come off also?
No, that stays on. That's there forever.
Okay, so it's inside the threaded area?
Yeah, correct. It has a little U that it squeezes on, and then you can't actually pull it off. Yeah, right. No, the hydrant's totally usable, doesn't do anything. It has a spring, so that it's kind of vandal-proof. I mean, I don't know about the vandals pulling it and trying to hit another kid beside them. But I've checked with some other cities, and haven't had any problems with that as being you know, kids breaking them or anything like that. So, But to go back to the traffic, it's you know, I don't know whether we have to phase it in over a couple of winters, if we do it that, and, you know, segregate the neighborhoods and try to do a couple of neighborhoods. The hardest neighborhood, obviously, is the Ave and Beachmont, for the most part, yeah, and the Revere Street end. Those are the biggest ones that we have problems with as far as getting a clear path. We did, and through the DPW, I just wanted to say that there weren't many streets that we couldn't get down. There were only a few. We did get down. Only got trapped in a couple. And for the most part, the firefighters are told not to commit themselves until they know they can get down a street. The other apparatus stay on a clear street before they all commit. But it went well. We only had, I could honestly say there were only 2 real problems that we had. One was in the Ave, and one was down on Revere Street. So, okay.
Thanks, Chief. Mr. Superintendent, you're the focal point.
Fire away.
You know, just some thoughts on, you know, what went on and what we, your
Well,
thoughts
obviously,
about doing things.
It's a very hectic winter for us, and, you know, this upcoming season's probably going to be more hectic. As the mayor said, I don't want to be redundant, but the fact of the matter remains that the infrastructure took a serious hit. We've got, that we know of, we have 26 hydrants that are completely shared off, not even, in, you know, we have probably 50 catch basins, sewer and drain manhole covers that need to be totally replaced, hundreds of signs. I mean, the infrastructure really took a serious beating. We have 42 water trenches that are out there presently. We can talk about that later if you want to, but concerning the snow removal, like Gene said, I don't think there were many streets that we couldn't get up during the storm because Gene and the mayor were driving around, coordinating with me. We always had a front-end loader on standby in case there was a street that got kind of digging. We try to get in there and dig them out. But having said that, just because we can get a fire truck up and down the street doesn't mean it's safe. I mean, we can get apparatus in and out of there. We need to get these streets widened out. There are different programs. I think putting signage throughout the entire city, it's very costly. I think what they do in a lot of other cities and towns, when it snows, you have to be out in the street. We talked about this a few years ago. We could probably put 40, 50 locations throughout the city with a blue light on, like they do in Peabody and Lynn and other communities. When that blue light is on, that means our parking ban, our snow removal processes are in effect, and in accordance with those rules and regulations, you have to be off the street. There are a lot of communities, Beachmont, Shirley Ave, Revere Street, even some of the smaller streets off your side streets out there. We don't put big trucks down there because we can't get them down there. So the big trucks, those little trucks can only push so much snow. So when you start getting snow that, you know, the blade is this high, but the banks are this high, you're just shortening down the street. So you need to be able to at least get heavy equipment in. You can use the smaller trucks to keep things open, and then after the storm, we're going to have to push everything back. Now, we've had, not to the degree what we had this year, but, you know, this was my 16th year, and I would say at least 5 of the years in the 16 years that I've been here, we've come up against this problem of too much snow in certain neighborhoods that disrupt the flow of our emergency apparatus to a certain degree. Now, sometimes it takes 2-3 days to clean that up. This time it was a lot different. We had to bring in crews from New York City to do, not New York, but New York State, to remove snow. You know, it was a very costly venture this year, and I think if we can polish up our ordinance on no parking on certain sides of the street. Like Gene said, down at Beachmont, we were getting cars from Winthrop. On Revere Street and the Pines, we were finding cars from Lynn, and they just, because they can't park at all, period. And the Winthrop parking ban went on for like 2.5 weeks. So it wasn't like it was in effect for 2 or 3 days. It was in effect for, you know, 2.5 weeks. I know people that, you know, even my relatives that we have, my aunt was putting her car in my dad's driveway because she couldn't park her car on the street. So these are the things that we're up against. But we need to critique it so that it's suited to Revere. We just can't say we're going to pick something out of Medford or or Somerville or Lynn because it works for them and it's going to work here. That's not going to be the case. We're really going to need to go, because as the mayor said, we could have one-sided parking, but there are going to be streets that should have no parking on it. So we can go with a generic, one-sided parking ban, and then it flip-flops back and forth, but there's going to be other streets that are just going to have no parking on it at all.
Okay, so we all have the gist of the plan and the development we want to do. What I want to do, I want to bring Donnie back up, because I know the guys want to talk about potholes and, what you have planned for that. I would ask, I know a couple of, I'm going to go down the line, Counselor, so everybody gets their moment. And, but, we only have a half hour before the next meeting, so, just, pace your time, think about the other councilors that want to ask some questions. I know Councilor Reardon has some thoughts, and I'll start from my left this time and work to the right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'll be as brief as I possibly can, although this is a pretty complicated situation because we've got multifaceted issues, and certainly I appreciate what the mayor says about it's going to be painful, but I think that we need to find ways to make it as unpainful as possible. And one thing I'm going to suggest is that, first of all, this was probably the worst winter, certainly since you've been involved in it. It certainly has been the worst winter, even back, and I remember back to the blizzard of '78. For a lot of different reasons, it wasn't as bad as what we experienced the month of February this year, no question about it. But the thing that one of the biggest problems we have is automobiles, no question about it, and parking and one-way streets. I'm prepared to suggest that we consider making, for instance, the streets on the uphill side of the northern side of Park Avenue alternating one-way, because I think at this point it was gotten to the point where people almost came to blows about, backing off. I don't think and there's other benefits to that, to having it, those streets going one way. There'll be less traffic on the streets that are two ways, for one thing. And it's certainly, the length of the street suggests that a one-way situation would be good there. But that's only a very small little portion of this problem. I mean, the issue is really automobiles. And I think that, and I agree, that at some point we're going to have to institute a ban on parking, although I think it needs to be a tiered issue. We don't want to be banning people from parking in front of their homes, for instance, for 6 inches of snow. So we need to, it's an issue of putting a plan together, making sure that the public is aware of the plan going in, or making them as aware of it as possible through the use of social media, through the use of letters for those who aren't up on that, and put the plan out in front of them, what we're going to do. And again, the biggest issue being, of course, parking. And the other thing we got to consider is, when we force people not to be able to park in front of their homes, we need to think of a place possibly where they could put their cars instead. The garage was fantastic, and I used it myself. 3 cars, we put 2 of them in the driveway. We try to park them on the front so that we don't block the car during the regular course of events. But we removed 1 vehicle and put it down in the garage, leaving the street in front of the house so that the plow could get to the snow. It only makes sense. Unfortunately, not everybody did it, but I think we may have to force them to do it. But I think if we do force them to do it, we need to think about places where they can put their vehicles in the meantime. The other thing, and I'm not talking about every snowstorm, but certainly in the most severe weather, we have to think about perhaps providing a pickup time in their local neighborhood to take them back to their home. But we have buses that we use for the schools. There's no reason we couldn't use this on a scheduled basis to make it as convenient as people to take their cars off the streets and put them someplace else for 12, 14, 16, 24 hours, whatever the snow event. I mean, we got to take advantage of the fact that this is predictable. Much of what happened this year we knew was going to happen 24 or 48 hours in advance. We need to take advantage of that. Get the information out there, get the cars off the streets, and allow the DPW to do their job. I would be willing to bet, just off the top of my head, we probably would have spent $1 million, maybe more or less, if we had taken care of the snow when it fell, rather than trying to remove it between cars and all of that well after it had fallen. So that's, and I honestly think it would not hurt to engage a couple of the ward councilors before any final plan is made, so that everybody's on the same page here. Because I think everybody has some ideas that are very specific to the areas that they live in, and that may be helpful in dividing a plan of which streets are going to be affected, which streets you're going to have to ban parking on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a multifaceted thing, and we haven't got time to explore everything here, but I think I'd certainly be willing to offer. In fact, I've created an outline while I was sitting in the snow and I couldn't get to the court. I had nothing better to do, so I sat around. But anyway, I'd be glad to share that with you guys, and it's just the beginning, really, of my thoughts about the whole situation. As far as the potholes are concerned, I know, and I think it's worth mentioning the fact that we do have a request for bids on that in the packet today, I noticed, and you might want to make a few terms, because I've been telling people that we did get, what, $117,000 from the state to do this, and that rather than take it a shovelful at the time, we're trying to address it in a more organized fashion, and that requires a contractor to do that. So
what we have going on right now, as far as the contract is concerned, Frank Stringy, myself, and Nick Rice from the engineer, and Mike Kessman drew up the specifications to have a pothole repair contract as well as a trench repair contract. Presently, there's over 40 trenches that are spread across the city. Today was the first day that we had one of our subcontractors come in. We're allowed to spend up to $10,000 for emergency type of situations. We have a vendor in today who laid down 15 tons of asphalt doing potholes today, which is a remarkable number for an 8-hour shift. Getting back to, Steve, what you said about the snow removal, I agree with everything you said, except for the fact that we shouldn't be having people move when there's 6 inches of snow. I feel we do have to do that, because if you don't push it back to especially early in the season, because if you don't push it all the way back very early in the season, you're going around cars. Now those bump outs aren't 6 inches off the curb line. They're 4 and 5 feet off the curb line. And then the next storm comes in, people start piling up snow. So I think what most communities do, and I would probably, when I say most, probably 90% is when they have a program in effect. It's when it snows, period. Now, if you know you're going to get a dusting or something like that, you know, we have the right to enforcement, depending what time of year it is. You know it's going to melt in a day, like, you know, towards March. You get them late December, January, to the end of February, when it's cold, you have to get the snow to the curb lines. And that's the only thing. We've tried that before on our emergency arteries, and it just didn't work out for us, because you get 3 or 4 small accumulative snowstorms, 6 inches or below. Well, you got 6, you got 5, you got 4. Now you got 15 inches of snow you just out, and your banks are 4 or 5 feet off the curb line.
perhaps we're getting a little too technical. I'm talking about 6 inches of snow. If you put an entire citywide parking ban into effect, that might not be appropriate in some neighborhoods with 6 inches of snow don't matter. As far as the arteries are concerned, or what we should certainly designate more and more, I think, emergency arteries. It certainly makes sense. I mean, for instance, Park Avenue, as you know, the days of that being not an emergency artery, I think, are gone at this point. And that needs to be expanded to both sides of the street. I hate to say it, and I know my constituents aren't going to be happy about it, but if that was a dangerous situation for much of the winter, quite honestly. And but as far as, you know, the neighborhoods are concerned, you know, there's certainly things about which reasonable people can disagree about that thing, and I certainly would defer to your expertise on that.
Thanks, Councilor. Councilor Guanasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've experienced over the last couple of weeks, I've tried to jump the gun here and talk to some of the constituents. We're thinking about making one-ways to make a, and I'm coming up with a situation that really, I don't know, it's difficult to deal with. Some want it, some don't. So when we make these decisions to make the one-ways, we're really got our hands full based on the fact that there are a lot of people, you can't get the whole street to agree on something, and they all have valid issues and points to what they're talking about. I think that in terms also of making streets that, where we now allow parking on both sides, we make them one-way, one-sided only, then you take neighbors from other streets parking in front of these people's property. So and they've talked to me about that. So every point of issue that they've brought out is valid. The only thing being is we're charged with a responsibility to make our streets as safe as possible. So, and we need to do that. We need to have the courage to go and do that and know that we're doing the right thing, to allow these plows to go down and take care of the business at hand. I mean, so we have to really, when we have that public hearing in terms of, as of course that we have to do before transportation, we just have to be mindful, and members of the Transportation Commission have to understand that this is, if we're talking about this and making the street one way, we're talking about it because we're concerned about public safety. And you even mentioned, Donnie, that there are some side streets off Revere Street that are very, very narrow, and there is absolutely nowhere for these people to park, and so when someone calls me in reference to parking on sidewalks, I tell them to the extent that I'm stuck in a situation whereas they have no place to park. And we kind of turn our head to this, and I don't ask the police officers to come down and tag these people based on there's no place to park, So we got a tough situation going on. And again, over the several years that I've had the luxury of representing Ward 3, I didn't have as many calls as I had in the past. They had a couple of concerns, and they were valid concerns, and I try to address them. And 99% of the people are very, very reasonable after you just review the situation with them. So all they want to do is have someone hear their concern. That eases the pain a little bit. So I think that the city did an admirable job, and I think that some of these outside vendors that come in to do the plowing, maybe we should tell them what the game plan is more, so to keep them more in sync, or have a game plan readily available to them. I know you have somewhat of a plan, but they have to, maybe we can get consistent basis of these vendors going to the same area that they always clean, so they're familiar with the properties there.
The problem in your area out there is pertains from North Shore Road down to the St. Anthony's Church area, is that they do park on both sides. The street, you can't even get down there when they're parking with no snow. And so what happens is we get these small little pieces of equipment in there, and then people don't move their cars. And then when we need to get in there with a piece of heavy equipment, the heavy equipment can't get in there.
If you call it being...
The equipment is bigger than the fire apparatus. If you want to get a payloader down the street with a 10, 12-foot blade on it, or a bucket that's got a 5 or 6 yard bucket on it because you want to push anything down to the end of the street to clean things out, then, something has to give. And generally, it's, if you want it to be right, the cars can't be there. And that's why all the other cities and towns, when they put their parking bans in, they try to come up with the most reasonable solution that they can. But to have an effective snow removal or snow plowing program in place, you can't let cars park wherever they want. And that's the problem here. We even run into problems with people where they don't allow them to park on the street, is they leave their cars hanging out of their driveway 2-3 feet out because they don't want the snow going into their driveway. So people look at every other angle, and that's not the majority of the people, like the mayor said. Most people come out, like especially this last year was great. They were feeding us, giving us coffee, things that in the past you never saw. So there was a tremendous effort on the part of the residents to come out there, and they knew what we were up against. But there's always that 5 or 10% of the people in every neighborhood that just make it very difficult.
Well, the only thing that really saved me,
for the residents, for us, and everybody included.
Donnie, the only thing that really saved me in some of the side streets off Revere Street, to be, if you call it lucky, we don't have sidewalks, and it goes right up. We have it, so that really saved us quite a bit. Having, sometimes that works in your favor. And in this particular case, it did, because people were allowed to park close to their property lines, allowing for double passing of vehicles. And so we did luck out. But if we had sidewalks with curbs, we wouldn't be able to do that.
The problem with that is once they try to remove the snow because they want to remove their car, the snow ends up back in the street. So now you've got a problem. I haven't seen a plow in 3 days.
Yeah, I know.
And so that's where you get that type of a comment from. Everybody wants to be accommodated to the utmost degree. And, you know, the thing that bothers us is if you have a driveway, you should use it. And we drive up and down streets,
I
and
know.
the driveways are empty, and, you know, they can.
Very
accommodate
annoying.
cars. So it's a difficult thing out there. I don't think there's gonna, like the mayor said, this is not gonna come with no pain.
Yeah.
Some people are gonna accept things, are gonna have to accept things that there's a change in their life. And people don't like change. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened in this community that you had groups come up here. When I was in the council, you guys remember coming up here, people were up here screaming and yelling about things, and 5, 10 years later,
Same thing.
it's just the standard, the way things are, the way living is.
Well, shifting to another gear, potholes. I've been talking to everybody who calls me and speaks with me, whether it be via phone or I meet them in the street. I tell them that we have monies that we've received. We're gaining professional help to help put these potholes to rest, and we're filling as quick as possible. The only thing I ask of you, as Director of Public Works, is that there be a fair distribution. I know we can't do every pothole right, but we should take a couple of streets in each ward each time we attack this problem. So this way here, one ward isn't all completed, and then one other ward is sitting there looking for help. I think we should sort of distribute the workload on that.
We do to a large degree. Miles Kennedy out of the mayor's office and I, they try to set up something where this is a priority, and we try to go to each individual neighbor. But like today, we did stay in the Ward 4 and the Ward 6 section basically today because we needed to concentrate around the high school, Mountain Ave, you know, the travel areas, Fernwood Ave, Barrett Street, Beach Street, and, you know, the contractor.
Well, I have 2 schools in my
I
area.
understand, and we'll get there, you know, before, not tomorrow, it's gonna rain, but we have a crew that's come in, this crew today did, Hill Construction did 15 tons of asphalt today. And
The thing that makes me very sick, when I go Revere Street, I know how hard I fought to get that done, and I see that depression there on Revere Street.
there's 2 of
That absolutely drives me crazy. We just did this 2 years ago, and then we have that major depression there, and it's,
Well, that's because we had a series of water breaks this winter, and Revere Street happened to get 2. There was one right near former Councilor Tater's house. And
Yes,
another one
that's
down
what I'm
near-
referring to.
Near Billy T's, and, you know, you got.
Both in Ward 3.
You got a 10-inch, yeah, you got a 10-inch water main there, so when that thing erupts, it does a lot of damage. It tears
Yeah.
the street up, and a lot of portions of Revere Street still have the old cobblestone down there, so when we try to find a water break, the chase is on. Sometimes you're here, sometimes you're there, it's popping up over there, but the cobblestone keeps it down because it's all cemented in. So it has to find that little void that it gets out. Sometimes we need to call the MWRA in to do leak detection in order to find these things. So it's not that, that's not a pothole to any degree on Revere Street. It's a trench caused by, damage caused by.
well, I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Count me in whatever you need to do, and whatever input you need from me as a ward councilor. I'll be more than happy to help in any fashion I can, and do what I have to do.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on what the superintendent said, and it was actually something that Councilor Guanasso talked about, was talking with the neighbors, and half the people want a one-way, half the people don't want a one-way. You're going to find that no matter who you talk to, which is really why I think the reason why the Traffic Commission was ever formed, it was taken away from the City Council, so you guys were off the hook from having to say, well, these 10 constituents want this, these 10 don't. We have a separate commission with all these people behind me here who obviously know what they're talking about. So, you know, we will clearly run plans by you. And, by the way, if you've got some thoughts, then definitely forward us your thoughts, what you'd like to see. You know, if there's some streets you say, hey, I think this should be one way, you know, put that up for discussion or put it up for consideration. Send us an email. If you're sitting there one day and you know, thinking about your ward, thinking about your neighborhood, send us what you think, because we'll factor that into the discussion, and then we'll present the council with a plan which you'll be able to look at again and say, oh, wait a minute, this street here, let's talk about this street, maybe not, maybe yes. But we want, you know, we clearly want to do it right. But, you know, I think you've got to keep in mind, you have a traffic commission for that reason. So if I was on the city council, I wouldn't be knocking door to door saying, do you want this, do you want that? I would just let the traffic commission do its job, and I think at the end of the day, we'll have a plan that works. Okay, I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Before I give it to Council Zambudo, I just want to recognize Chief Caffarelli coming down today. Thank you, sir. And Councilor Rigo coming in and Councilor Morabito coming in. So, Councilor Morabito, I'll give you the floor for a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recall in the winter, I believe the mayor brought it up to the superintendent of using their parking lots for parking. School department wasn't a big fan, but when push came to shove and the snow accumulation was excessive and so significant, we ended up using their parking lot. How effective was that? And can we continue to do this when there's a lot of an accumulation next year? When there's, I'm not talking about 2 or 3 inches, but is it possible to use the school, designate each school within the district in the ward as a parking facility?
So that's a very good question, and Revere used to use our school parking lots as a place for people to get their cars off the road, and we stopped doing that because, number one, we've got to make sure that we can get the kids to school. And so our schools become top priority. I mean, there's a lot of top priorities, but schools definitely need to be cleared out so that kids can get to school as quickly as possible. If we can, if we can get away without calling school, we don't call it. But if we have to call school, we want to make sure the next day they can get there. So we try to keep the parking lots empty. If we know there's going to be an extended period of time where kids will be out of school, then that's why this time we made that accommodation. But if you look at surrounding cities and towns that have, that either currently or have allowed for parking in schools during snowstorms, they're going away from that for that very reason, because we need to get the schools open. I mean, we were wrestling this year with the school department trying to figure out how we're going to get those 180 days in for the kids so that they can get to the end of their school year, and we're up now to June 25th. And thankfully, we didn't get any more snow when we really could have, when, in the month of March, when we really could have. Sometimes we get clobbered in the month of March. So we were fortunate. Otherwise, the kids would have been going to school into July. So, we're getting toward the tail end of June. Again, like I say, June 25th. But we try to make sure that we use those parking lots as a last resort. So, hopefully that makes some sense. But I share your concern for, obviously, if we're going to tell people take your cars off the road, but you got to provide some place for them to put it. But as Don Goodwin said, he's got a relative in Winthrop who came to Revere and put a car in a driveway at a relative's house here in Revere. I mean, unfortunately, you got to do what you got to do. I mean, we want to make it as easy as we can. We work with the MBTA to open up that lot, but we don't want to do it at the expense of 7,000 school children and teachers.
I agree, but I think there still can be a solution around it. Whether it's, for instance, if you're going to experiment with one-way parking, one-way streets during snow emergencies, maybe residents on that street can register with the city, and they can have they can get the okay from the city to park in a school zone. But maybe we can section off a section of the parking lot so the plows can get around and they can still clean a good portion of the parking lot. Something of that magnitude. I know I'm sure we can work, when push comes to shove.
I'd be happy to.
We've looked at every angle. The problem is if you set aside a specific parking area, the cars don't get out of there. And for us to get in there, I mean, we use 40, 50 pieces of equipment to clear up the schools, because generally we only get from, let's say, 10 o'clock at night till 7, 8 o'clock in the morning to get all our schools taken care of. Now, we got some large parking lots in these schools. So if you allow a third or a half of the parking lot to people to park in there, by the time that those people get out, first of all, there won't be enough parking for staff. I mean, we've looked at that. And then the second part of that is that now they're in there removing snow during school, and you're disrupting classes, or the fact is they get out of school while you're still in the process of removing the snow, and you're putting the kids at risk of injury. So it's a very delicate situation with the schools. I know Malden is definitely getting away from it because it actually costs them probably 4 additional school days that they had to close because they couldn't get, children into the schools were ready to open. The grounds, for the most part, were clear, and the streets were clear around the school, but the parking lots just couldn't accommodate cars for the staff because the residents' cars were parked in there for days.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to clarify that. By no means do I expect residents to park there if there's 1, 2 inches or 3 inches of snow. But when there's a significant amount of snow accumulation, I think there's,
during the school vacation,
something we can do.
People because we knew that the schools were going to be closed, and we use all the schools. So we use the Lincoln School, the New Bromley Marsh School, we use the New Wayland School, the Garfield. When we know we can accommodate them, obviously we let them do that. But as a matter of getting people into the habit of saying, okay, it's snowing out, let's get to the school, I don't think we can really put a program in and encourage that.
My next question is on converting 2-way streets to 1-way. Now, obviously, it would be trial by error, but I guess my question is, would this be all winter long? Would this be just during snow emergencies?
Stephen, if you're going to turn 1-ways, they have to be permanent, and they have to be all the time, because that's just the way.
So it wouldn't be a seasonal?
It wouldn't be a seasonal, it would be all the time. I mean, the best way to do is alternating 1-way streets. We have that sort of down the Pines. We need to, like Council Redden said, the alphabet streets, those are perfect for going either, some of them are already. I think we have to add some more to it. It works well there because you don't get that head-on traffic. A prime example down the Beachmont area would be Endicott Avenue. Now, the problem, that I saw, that we closed the gate. It wasn't the fact that the gate was closed, but people from Winter were trying to get into Winter, people from Revere trying to get into their houses. You've got a bottleneck of the street. If that was a 1-way, that never would have happened. You would have just had straight-through traffic. You wouldn't have had all that traffic ran down there. And, so those are the things we have to look at when we're doing this. I think, you got to see how traffic flows. Obviously, you put something into effect. If there's a problem, you work to correct that problem. But I think that alternating 1-way streets seems to be the patterns that they use in most communities across this country where they don't even get snow. I mean, it's just something that, the traffic is just too heavy these days.
Thank you. I appreciate your detailed answer. I just have one more question in regards to the state grant of $117,000. Will 100% of that only be used for filling potholes, or would it be used for specific items you mentioned earlier, like catch basins or signs that are down?
Well, the signs that are down doesn't cover for all the catch basins. I don't believe in the hydrants. I don't believe are covered under that. But Frank is working on, we're going to be scarifying some bad pieces of road that if we continuously go in and keep putting patches and for example, the lower end of Shirley Ave, down near the big one, the whole middle needs to be scarified and done. Beach Street needs to be scarified and done. If we can find other areas like on Crescent Avenue where there's just continuously pothole, you take care of that. Washington Ave is a perfect example of that. Last year, we were tortured there. We were there probably 3 or 4 days a week last year. This year, last summer, Frank had it milled and taken care of. The only problem we had on Malden Street this year again is where we had a problem with the infrastructure, where we had to dig down into the ground and you have a trench there. Sergeant Street, as you come off of Malden Street, now you see all the potholes developing there at the light. So we're probably at some point going to be taking sections of Cushman Ave, maybe not this year or next, but Frank can give you a more updated detail of what we're going to do for scarifying. And so some of it's going to be for the majority of the money that I'm going to use. I'm probably going to use at least $10,000 to do potholes, but then we have 42 trenches that are out there. So the majority of the money that's left over from scarifying street repair, total street repair, not just putting a patch in there, will be for these trenches. As after we got 2 there, we got to do full depth and do it right so that it doesn't become a problem. Because if you just do a patch, it's no good. You've got to get it down to the subsurface, patch it properly, and not worry about it for 5 minutes. So that's what we plan on doing with the money that we're going to be receiving.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hess.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for repairing the chain link fence at the Lincoln School, which was a very dangerous situation. All right. Potholes, snow plow, I think we have to come up with a new procedure as far as my street up in Fenley Street, all right? I know the fellow who does it, okay? All he does is go down the middle, back in the middle, back and forth. He never opened it up. And what happened was after the first storm, he couldn't push it. It was too heavy. So I think these people have to be told the way to do it.
Well, that's what I was saying initially in the beginning, you need to push it back. And your area, Bob, is another area that we put a small vehicle up there. There's not a big piece of equipment up there. So if you have 6, 7, 8 inches or more of snow that's built up on
Can't
the
do anything.
line, we can't do anything.
Right, absolutely.
So if we had a situation where we had a parking ban in place, what most communities would do is they continue keeping those streets open for public, and then before the storm was over, they would come down and pair up. One would push, and the other, a bigger vehicle would come and push it onto the sidewalk. Now that's when you get the complaints about, I just shoveled my sidewalk, my driveway was open.
Well, public safety
But
takes
I agree,
paramount.
but
I don't care what.
That's the proper way
Right.
to do it. So if we can get that and be able to push it to the curb, you're still going to need to put a heavy piece of equipment in a lot of these neighborhoods. And the problem with the big, heavy pieces of equipment, other than some of the payloaders that you get, they don't articulate around parked cars, because people are going to shovel the spot or put their car in before the storm is even over. And you're stuck with the remnants are left behind, where they pile snow behind the car, in front of the car, 6, 7 feet high.
Right.
Throw it back out.
But I noticed in certain areas you use in on flat grounds, heavy equipment compared to the hills.
Well, some of the heavy equipment can't get up the hills, but they don't have four-wheel drive. They don't, if you don't want to see a 15-ton payloader coming down off of one of the.
No, but a heavy-duty truck, you expect to see it up
Well, they
there.
have well, we only have so many. We only have 4 presently in the city yard. We only have 2 that have four-wheel drive.
But as far as the people out there who you're renting them from
Well, the
or
smaller trucks
utilizing.
all have four-wheel drive. That's
Right.
why they can climb these hills and get around.
And the other thing is, traversing the city in the last couple of weeks, I noticed that some potholes were, in effect, major trenches. And I was wondering why the DPW didn't get out there earlier to fill them. Specifically, Beach Street, you had to stop your vehicle, damage to the people's cars out there. You've got a tremendous liability out there.
Well, but what people don't take into effect, like tomorrow, today's a beautiful day. Tomorrow you won't be doing any potholes.
Right.
Because you can't, if you've got water in the hole, you're not going to be able to.
You can't
put
do anything.
asphalt, and it'll be gone by the next day. So this is why there's a pothole season, because a lot of the snow is melting, refreezing, it's in the holes, it's wet. Obviously they try to go and get some of these craters that they can get, but that piece on Beach Street wasn't potholes. That street needed to be totally redone. If you go down there, you can look, there's 15 different potholes in a span of, and trench in a span of 15, 20 feet.
Right.
But
But again, why didn't you put something in the hole? Even though the rain may make it loose,
We do, and it ends up on the street, and then you look around, what do you think all the pebbles and debris and all this stuff is? That's all.
And the last thing,
that's all that they put down.
Mr. Chairman, is, I concur with the on-street park on one side, without question, and I think that's a great effort if we can get involved with that to, in earnest, get it done. Because, again, we learned from this past experience this year, how it's really needed.
Well, I agree.
Thank you, Donnie. Thank you.
Councilor Rigo, you have anything to say? Pass. Councilor Patch, Ward 6 Councilor. As you can tell, we're talking about the plan for next year, snow removal and parking plan, and potholes. We have about 3 minutes before we have to turn over to the next meeting, so you're the last one to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I had to take care of a family matter, being late. Tony, well, the way we talked during the year, it's these on these drains that have been caving in. It's really a public safety matter. I know driving around There's quite a few of them. Is this going to be taken care of with this?
It's going to be a process. We'll get the ones that are worst, that are actually fallen in. We've got a couple of, we've got plates over that actually have fallen in. And we're going to have a discussion about it Thursday, whether it's going to take some additional funding to get out there, because once again, you know, the water and sewer department is responsible for water, sewer, drain, and repair of manholes and catch basins. So you've got 40 trenches, you've got 40 structures, you've got 28 hydrants. You know, it's a daunting task for a crew of 5 or 6 guys.
Does it seem to you, I know it does to me, that this last couple of years, it seems like you got more and more of these caving in than before?
We generally get 20 to 25 a year. I mean, it's, believe it or not, Bob, it's just that sometimes they're in certain areas, and people have a tendency to say, you know, this has happened a lot more often because, you know, I didn't have any last year, I didn't have one the year before, but now I got 5. You know, so they do move around, they do kind of move around the city.
Right.
But we generally do at least 25, but we have over 40 this year, so it's plus with the hydrants, and so we're going to have a meeting on Thursday to discuss if there's a way to get some funding to have somebody like Marquez, who's under contract with Chapter, and we do have some type of contract with them for repairing certain items in the Chapter 90 contract. So we can pull, if we can pull something out, then we'll do that. If we can't, then we'll have to put another spec together like we did for the trench and the pothole, and we'll put that to bid. But
Right, because it really is a public safety issue. I'm surprised nobody really got hurt
well, no, I understand.
from these.
This happens every year to us. I encourage everybody, if you find them, because we don't know where a lot of them are. And you know, the guys are working, they're not searching the city looking for these things. So if you see them, please email them to me, and we'll get them on the list. Because we did send them out during the rain the other day. There wasn't much for them to do, and they found 40 structures that are in need of some repair. To a certain degree. Some are totally collapsed. Some, if we don't get them, they're going to fall in next year. So, you know, if you know, you try to do the best you can.
Well, that's what I mean. It just went from 25 to 40. I mean,
Right. Well,
I noticed it just seems there's a lot of them.
yeah, there's a lot.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor, and I thank everybody for their thoughts for today, and we'll meet again next month, and we'll see what progress what we've done, and make sure all the councilors bring in your one-way streets or one-sided parking, whichever way you want to do it. Throw it at the mayor's office or Donnie's office. And but I just want to throw one thing out that I started several years ago, and we have some major commercial properties in the city, and specifically I'll use Suffolk Downs. I know it's in the future it's going to be developed. But in the meantime, I had made plans two years ago to have my folks in Shirley Ave area park at Suffolk Downs. We made the arrangements, we advertised it. Donnie, well, we have one car there.
So
We're making it available to them. Folks, use it.
Well, I think what that demonstrates is that when people really need to get their car off the road, that they can. I think there was a lot of streets that was no parking because the snow was so huge, but they couldn't get down the street to park anyway.
But
So, and even when we did the snow removal, we put the temporary you can't park here signs up there.
It worked.
And it worked.
Yeah,
People
they found a place to go.
Put their cars for,
Right.
3 or 4
But,
cars.
we have some of these commercial properties that if we talk to these folks, like Suffolk Downs, like Wonderland, there's property out there that we can use there for parking, and, I'm glad I worked with MBTA for the garage parking. That's worked out terrific. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and we'll move over to the next meeting in a few minutes. Thank you very much. We're signing off. Thanks. Bye.